about that.
It's okay. Ready to go live. We have a quorum for the meeting of accountability, efficiency, and transparency. Glad to have y'all with us today. We've got several bills to look over. And if you need to make any kind of request or any questions, you'll have to unmute your phone before you ask it. So we'll just get started. First, we're going to call up HB 136. This is by Representative Turner, and it requires a bond for anyone who is in custody of money and in public service. The bond will only be about $25,000 or any other amount specified by law. The form of the bond will be provided by Section 25-115, and it'll go into effect July 1st, 2021. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Ayes have it. That will be passed on to the House calendar. We don't need it. Okay. Motion to pass.
Motion to reconsider.
We're not going to have those, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, good.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next one is 219, and our Vice Chairman, Dana Criswell, is going to take it.
Make sure I'm on there. Okay. House Bill 219 is a bill that comes to us from Representative Powell. What this does is, for an alarm company, it prohibits the counties from imposing penalties on the alarm company as long as the home alarm or the business alarm was installed properly. The history that I've got on this is what is happening is, I mean, people do what I do. They open the door, let their dog out in the middle of the night, the alarm goes off. Counties have rules that after a certain number of false alarms, they will then go after and want to charge the homeowner. But if the homeowner doesn't pay it, then they go after the next deepest pocket. So what this is designed to do is to protect those companies from just the constant counties coming after money for them. So that's what the bill does, as long as it's installed properly, as long as it's basically a homeowner or a user error, then the companies are not liable.
And the landowners, I mean, the property owners are not liable either.
This does not cover the property owners. This is just the businesses. So this is only a protection of the businesses as it stands right now.
This was brought, like I say, but Representative Powell, and we think the municipalities are looking for places to garnish money, and this is one of the reasons he brought it forward, I understand. Do we have any other questions? Not?
Title sufficient to pass?
We have a motion, title sufficient to pass. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. No, the motion.
A motion.
Oh, we did. Okay, thank you. All right, this is my first time this year. We'll get back. The next one is HB 274. And this was brought to us by Representative Zuber from down on the coast. it has to do with law enforcement officers using their uniforms, weapon, and vehicle during an emergency. You know, down on the coast, we think about hurricanes. Up north, we think about tornadoes. If a law enforcement officer is off duty and something like that happens, this bill provides the governing authority to enable him to be considered as on duty, and it would it's one of the things that they've asked for in some of these areas. So I don't think there's anything harmed by this bill. It just gives us another layer of protection when we do have an emergency. Are there any questions?
I have a quick question. Just want to make sure on line 18. So this decision has to be approved by the sheriff that he's going to then actually just be on duty. Is that correct?
I think it would be a decision that would be made and spread across the minutes, and then that way, if it occurs.
So if it had occurred, then the sheriff has to come back and say, yeah, that was covered, or
Well,
that
it would
was,
be on the minutes.
he went on duty.
Of the county.
You could do it and then go back,
No,
like, okay,
In
well,
other-
we did it, so let's, get approval now. You couldn't do that.
so
Okay.
we need, it would be approval before.
Okay, thank you.
I have
Anyone
a
else?
question, Chairman. So that would be this is Robin. So that would be approval for them to be paid for their work? Is that what you were saying?
It would be an approval to, if an off-duty officer had an emergency, we had a tornado or something like that, then it needs to be spread across the minutes of the county or the municipality, saying that we do give our officers this ability.
Okay, thank you.
And it's on a volunteer basis in the disaster situation. I mean, I guess if a guy was out there and decided not to do something, I don't guess he could be held liable. But if he does get out there and say direct traffic or help with the removal of debris and things like that, he would be considered on duty.
Okay, so then they would not any longer be off duty. They would be
No.
on. Okay.
Once they decided to join in the disaster relief, they would be on duty, considered.
Thank you.
It just means that they can use their equipment during their off-duty hours. They can use it even though they're not on duty. It doesn't make them on duty though.
Clarification by the lawyer here, the attorney. She said that it might not consider them on duty, but it would consider them able to use the equipment like they were on duty.
Like you wouldn't necessarily get paid. It's voluntary.
Okay, yeah. She said it wouldn't necessarily get paid because it is voluntary service in the disaster.
What about injury or anything like that? Would they be covered if they're off duty?
Um,
The bill doesn't speak to that. I know the other one that we have come in mentions that. Specifically mention that, so I don't know.
This one doesn't specifically mention that, but once they put it on the minutes of the county or municipality, then that could be entered in there and say, this is what happens.
Okay,
Which is. What, we need to ask. All right, any other questions? If not, my motion is titled sufficient do pass. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Motion passes. Next one is HB 357. This is just a bill where we have found that there was a loophole in the bonding measures that we have for the county officials and state officials. We found out that the purchasing clerks for the county, a lot of money passes through their hands, and they're not bonded. So this is just requiring a bond for them. It'll be $100,000 bond. Are there any questions? If not, my motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next one is very similar to that, 358. This bill increases from $50,000 to $100,000 bond for the purchasing agent by the school board. We have transferred a lot of money into the school boards to buy iPads and a lot of other things, and to protect ourselves and the counties in case something were to happen. We just realized this bond needs to be increased, and we feel like it's one of those things that's kind of been skipped over. Do we have any questions? If not, my motion is title sufficient to pass. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it passes, the bill passes onto the calendar. Next is Bill 453. Okay. Next is Bill 453. This bill creates a new section 1725.11.1 to allow certified law enforcement officers or certified part-time law enforcement officers who are employed by a county or a municipality to use his or her official uniform, weapon, or vehicle while performing volunteer service for a church, community club, a social event, or community event in the off-duty hours. The governing authority of the municipality or the sheriff must approve the use of such use on an employee-by-employee basis. The acts of omissions of an officer in discharge of a voluntary service shall be deemed as acts of omissions to be of the acts and omissions of the county or municipality of the employee and officer. That's if he's a full-time officer. The county or municipality employing the officer will and authorize the officer to perform volunteer services for a church, a community club, or a social event or other community event in off-duty hours shall be responsible for expenses and loss, including attorney's fees, as a result of the action taken against the jurisdiction arising out of the acts and omissions of the officer in discharge of this voluntary service. That's for the full-time officer. The part-time officer, according to the bill, the liabilities and that will be held by the people who hire the officer. In other words, they will assume liability for the car and the officer's actions and things like that if it's a part-time officer. Do we have any questions?
Maybe you said that, Mr. Chairman. This is Robin Robinson, but this is volunteer, so neither group of officers will be paid. It'll be simply volunteer.
This one's not. I'm sorry, well, I have misspoken. This is not voluntary. This is spread across. This is spread across the minutes of the board meeting for the county or the municipality. I'm sorry. I guess I'm getting some of them confused. Well, she just told me I was right. This is voluntary, but it has to be approved by the sheriff or the police chief, spreading it on the minutes of the board in order to have this approved across. It won't be across the board. It has to be in specific officer by officer, or employee by employee opportunities.
So they're not getting paid?
They're not getting paid by the municipality or the county at this time. They're being paid as an off-duty officer working something else if they
Okay.
get anything.
And I have one more question.
That's
The
if they
part-
get anything now.
Huh?
That's if they may be going to church as a person just at that church, and they take the vehicle and their arm and their gun and anything else that they need to be part of the protection of that church, and they don't get anything for that. This is a community activity, and they wouldn't necessarily be getting paid.
You said though on the part-time though, that they would be paid by the party that hired them. So if this is volunteer, no one should get paid. But if they are part-time and they are going to receive compensation, there needs to be a contract between the private party and either the city or however they're going to work it. Because like I've spoken before, there are insurance complications with this. So is the part-time guy getting paid?
Volunteer services.
It is volunteer services, so
Okay.
nobody's getting paid.
Okay.
But if it is a part-time officer, still the people who are having the event would be still charged with the liabilities of the officer being there and his equipment and the car. They would have to do it if he's on a part-time basis. It's
Okay.
only a full-time officer who volunteers, and he is covered by the municipality or the county.
I got you. Thank you, sir.
Oh, also in this bill, I forgot to mention this. This gives them the ability to allow a person who retires to receive his sidearm, or if he is killed in action, the widow can ask for the sidearm as long as funds are available.
Good deal.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Did I understand you to say that an act or omission of a full-time officer who's volunteering at his church or community event would be deemed to be the act or omission of his agency? So a city, I think that's what, is that right? I think that's what you said.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So thinking through this, so a city would be liable if an officer acted outside his scope, did something wrong at his church or at a community event, the city could be liable for that.
Well, outside of his scope, I mean, is the city liable for something outside of his scope? I mean, if he's following the rules that are set down for him, would he not be liable?
Well, I mean, outside of his authority, I guess would be if he did something unlawful and somebody filed suit against him for that. It sounds to me like the city would have to pay for that, or the county. Is that right?
That they would, but this has to be done, like I say, on a employee by employee basis. So the one involved, the sheriff or the police chief or mayor of the town would know what's going on there. And if he acts out and if he does it on a volunteer basis like this, it's liable. He would do it on his while he's on duty. So
And I know
they're
this is
willing
not
to
your
charge the people, the Police Chiefs Association and the Sheriff's Association have recommended this language.
Okay. I didn't know if there was a specific, and I know it's not your bill. I don't know if there was a specific reason why we would make the city liable for full-time officers' errors potentially, but not for part-time officers' errors.
We're checking to make sure what I've told you is right.
Okay. It would seem to me, like it would discourage a city or county from agreeing to do that if they knew that they would be on the hook for something, or at least from their full-time officers. I guess if it was a part-time officer, you'd let them do whatever they want.
No changes are made to it. Yeah, so it's different. This
Okay.
isn't different, like it's everything, that's what that section's
Oh,
dealing with.
okay.
But the new language, it doesn't make a distinction between full-time or part-time for the volunteer services as far as liability or anything like that.
Okay, I got down on a different code section. I'm informed. There is no distinction between part-time and full-time in what has been changed.
Okay, so the city or county would be liable for the actions or omissions of whether part-time or full-time.
Yes,
They have to approve it.
but they have to approve this. I mean, it's not like it's going to be a person just goes out there and volunteers. This has to be talked about and it has to be held in the minutes of either the board of aldermen, the city municipality or the board of supervisors or in the county.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, title sufficient do pass. All in favor? You can raise your hands if you want to.
Aye.
Me.
Okay, motion carries. The next one is HB 595. This was brought to us through Representative Ladner, who is the chairman of PEER. And this comes from PEER. This bill amends section 2551 to provide the removal of state-appointed officers for certain forms of willful neglect. Willful neglect also shall consist of failure by the officer or to respond to a subpoena issued by a court, executive agency, or legislative body, failure to comply with a court-ordered repayment of any funds that have been misspent, or failure to comply with the agreement with the state auditor or attorney general to repay those funds, or failure to attend 3 consecutive meetings of the board, commission, or authority to which the officer has been appointed. An officer will not be considered present if participating telephonically in a meeting. And the way I understood that, this would not be telephonically on a Zoom meeting. But if he just called in and he was there on the phone, for some reason they had a problem with that. But any officer removed by the authority of this section shall be barred from future service in any appointment that requires appointment by the governor, lieutenant governor, or any other officer in the executive branch of government. And it'd go in effect July 1st, 2021. PEER had a problem with having enough people being at some of the meetings to get a quorum. So this is to encourage people to come to meetings, and some of these other things are pretty blatant. But does anybody have any questions?
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
This is Robin Robinson. Do you know why there was a difference between a telephone call and a Zoom call? Depending on where someone lives, it may be difficult, for internet services. I just didn't know what the reason for it was.
He
Or
didn't
I
tell
may
me.
have misunderstood what you said.
Was that? We missed something.
I
Go
said I
ahead.
might have misunderstood what you said between a telephone call and a Zoom call being different.
I don't really know what the difference was, but that was one of the things he said. And I'm open to an amendment if we want to take that out. I don't think it would hurt the bill because we are doing things differently nowadays.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, that was my concern. I didn't want to limit participation because maybe someone may not have internet or whatever it would take to get hooked up to Zoom.
Okay.
My suggestion.
Well, my vice chairman has an amendment that may allude to that. Let him talk. I appreciate what you say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my amendment would just on line 57, where it talks about the telephonic meetings, would just add unless approved by the board, commission, or authority. So they could approve it and say, okay, now then we're going to allow it, but the whole board would have to approve it.
Did everyone hear that amendment?
Yes, sir.
It would
I
be,
think that works
it would
wonderful.
be that the whole board would have to approve it ahead of time. Any, have a motion?
All right, did we pass the motion?
Well, okay, let's vote on the amendment. Everyone in favor of that amendment? Aye.
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 Okay. Anyone else? Amendment passes.
My motion is title sufficient do pass
Let me
as
ask if there's
amended.
any other
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are there any other questions for the motion? No other questions. We have a motion.
Title sufficient do pass as amended.
Title sufficient do pass as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next, we go to HB 609. Our Vice Chairman, Representative Crystal, will handle this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 609 we had last year. It passed out of this committee. It goes to universities, and we also passed it out of the House. It was killed by Corona in the Senate. What this bill does, it applies to Delta State University Commercial Aviation Department. It changes the procurement procedures for used aircraft. Under current purchasing procedures, they're pretty well limited to just buying new aircraft, mostly because of the time that it takes to get a purchase approved. Used aircraft sell quickly. Their new department chair has about $500,000 that he needs to buy some multi-engine trainer aircraft. He can buy 2 new ones or 5 used ones. But every time he puts in a bid for a used aircraft, by the time it goes through the state's procedures, the aircraft is gone. So this allows them, and I'll back up and say, we got this approved by DFA, IHL, and the university. So it allows them to set up their own purchasing procedures that have to be, and those procedures have to be approved by IHL, DFA, and the university, so that they can make these purchases a little bit quicker and save the university a lot of money and get them the equipment they need. The whole point of all of the approval, the procedures have to be laid out beforehand. There's no way that the department chair then can start purchasing aircraft from his brother-in-law. So I believe there's plenty of protections here. Everybody seemed to agree, and I think it will help the university quite a bit in spending their money a little more wisely. And that's an explanation of the bill.
Okay, do we have any questions? We passed this bill and it passed the House last year. It died in the Senate.
Title sufficient do pass.
Okay, I have a motion, title sufficient do pass. All in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. We are going to HB 718. Stacy, do you have that?
I do.
Okay.
House Bill 718 basically amends section 2315-805. Basically where our state state elected officials file campaign finance reports and they're online with the Secretary of State. Currently, your city and county folks turn them into circuit clerk. I believe they're supposed to be posted online there, but they're rarely posted online there. So all this bill does is says that once your city or county candidates file with the circuit clerk has 1 day to forward this to the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State will put this online and have it in the search window as well. Search for candidates and view all elected officials' campaign reports online.
That's your explanation. We've heard that explanation. This too was brought to us by the peer committee, and they thought this was necessary for us to go ahead and do this. Any questions?
I have a question. Does this have the code section in it regarding the time in which they have to be submitted?
They're supposed to submit 1 day after they turn it into the circuit clerk. She has 1 day to submit it to the Secretary of State.
Let me back up. I mean that the candidates have to submit to the Secretary of State or whatever.
This doesn't change any of that. I think that they have regulations that they have to follow. All this is doing right now is they have their requirements, and they just forward them to the circuit clerk and it stays there. So basically this is just extending it where the circuit clerk forwards it to the Secretary of State to put on the state website. It doesn't change their local requirements.
The reason I was asking, the Secretary of State, some of you may be aware of this, you may not. The Secretary of State's office, even though everything is submitted electronically, either by email or through their system, they are now working under the assumption, and have been, I think, for a while, that if it's due on a Monday and you submit it or if it's due on a Saturday and you submit it on a Saturday and they don't get to the office until Monday to process it, they penalize you for 2 days, even though you submitted it on Saturday. They did that to me and I've appealed it, but apparently they've done it to a lot of other people. So I was going to say, if it has the code sections in there to do that, I would like to offer an amendment that the time that it's actually received by their office is the day that it is counted as submitted, if that makes sense. But it may not have the code section in there to do that.
Aaron, is that in there?
Okay. That code section is not in here, but it does say that it needs to be submitted before the date that they have, and it's
not able to make that amendment. Okay, is what, right?
Sir?
Not able to make that amendment in this bill. Is that right?
No, not at this time. Code section is not there.
I agree with that, Noah. Maybe we can come back and do something later to add that. Because once they turn it into the circuit clerk, it should be counted as on time.
Yeah.
If it is.
Yeah. If it's received before the close of business at that day.
Exactly.
Yeah, if it's received after the close of business, then it would go to the next calendar day. And like Representative Sanford said, if it's on the weekend, then it would go to that following business day. But they do have a problem over there.
Okay. Maybe we can remedy that in the bill next year, or maybe we can find one that's got the code section. We can do it then. I'm not against anything like that. Motion.
Title sufficient, do pass.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Okay. HR 813. This is my bill. It's about timber bridges. We know that we can build timber bridges cheaper than we can concrete bridges or metal bridges. The specifications on it, it has to have an annual average daily traffic of 125 cars or less. So this is not going to be a huge traffic road. The span has to be 100 feet or less, and the load limit must be 42 tons. That's enough to hold up all the transport of logs and other agricultural products these bridges that we're talking about are going to be on the back roads. And I mean, they're good looking bridges, and I happen to have a copy of some plans given to me by the Federal Highway Administration that they have plans that can be used on their roads. And I think it's a good idea for Mississippi to have these bridges. It helps us with the natural resources we have. It helps us get bridges built in places that we need to for a cheaper cost. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Robin Robinson. You said this would handle agriculture. Would it handle the poultry feed trucks that deliver feed out in the counties to the chickens?
Yes, it would. I mean, any vehicle weighing more than 42 tons is past the normal limit plus the amount that they allow to go over for agricultural products.
Thank you. I didn't hear 42 tons. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Anyone else? My motion is titled sufficient do pass. And all in favor say aye.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. This will be forwarded to the Transportation Committee. And if you have anybody on transportation that you'd like to talk to about this, I would appreciate it. Next, we go to HB 1212. Okay. And we may have to have an amendment on this. We had a little bit of a question about it. I tell you what, let's skip this one today. I'd rather talk to the speaker one more time because I think there may be an amendment coming on this one. We'll skip this today.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Yes, sir. This is Joseph Tubb. I thought I was unmuted, but I wasn't. On that last bill, what the wood pilings versus the concrete, what is your useful life estimated for either one, and then what's the cost basis per foot difference for the savings?
I have had varied cost on bridge, wood versus concrete. Basically, they say that we can build at least 2 wooden bridges to 1 concrete bridge for the same cost.
Yes.
The lifespan of a wooden bridge, we have some that have lasted 70 years in Mississippi. There's a possibility they could last even longer, but they are like concrete. They say 50 years.
Are the county engineers on board with this bill?
I haven't heard anything from them. We're talking about bridges that may be replacing wooden bridges already.
Yeah.
That's the reason we kept the traffic count low and we kept it to the rural roads. Main thing, we got somewhere around 6 or 7 bridges in Mississippi where people have to go and out of the way 25 or 30 miles to get across the creek from where they live.
Yes.
This is one of the things we're just hoping we can alleviate some of the bridge situation in Mississippi.
Sure. If we can build 2 to 1, that's a good thing.
So this
we
isn't
do-
replacing any concrete bridges that were there. This is just replacing wooden timber bridges with more timber bridges.
Well, I mean, if there were a concrete bridge that were out in an area that where they have gone down and they need to be replaced, it could go either way. But we do have Mississippi State talk to me the other day, and they have their engineers now being trained more toward wood and structures there. They're talking about high-rise buildings of wood and wooden bridges. And so in the past, some of our education systems on engineering have leaned toward the concrete, but now it's being brought back to wood because of the economical side of it. Any other questions?
No, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, HB 1212. This is another one that came through PERS. Oh, I see, I skipped it, 1213. No, we skipped. I'm sorry, we skipped. Here we go. Okay. Let's get lined up here. 1213, I believe Representative Criswell has that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 1213 deals with the agencies that we take from under the personnel board. Now, whatever your opinion of doing that is, it seems to be a fact of life here that we do that occasionally for quite a few agencies. The fact is, though, when we take them out from under the personnel board, there is no requirement for them to submit annual reports to Legislative Budget Office, Joint Legislative Committee, peer. So what this does is if we take an agency out from under the personnel board, then it requires them that they must submit these annual reports. It also, if you look on the very last line 130, the very last paragraph, it also requires them to show quantifiable improvements or measures that show improvement because they are out from underneath the personnel board. So again, whatever your opinion of taking them out, I believe this at least gives us some protection that we get to see how they're doing and they're not just, they have some oversight. And that's all it does is just require that report for agencies that might be taken out from the personnel board. That's the explanation.
Do we have any questions?
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is titled sufficient, do pass. All in
Second.
favor, say aye. Motion carries. Next, we have HB 1246. Representative Wills, do you have that? You have it?
Oh, were you going to go ahead and do that one today?
Yes.
Okay, sure. This one just addresses blighted properties in the Capital District, and this amends section 295201. And all it is doing is allows for demolition and removal of structures, property, and debris designated by the Capital Complex Improvement District Advisory Committee that is considered slum, blight, or which constitutes a nuisance to public health, safety, or welfare. I think this is good. I think it will help clean up the Capital District and also help in safety as far as people being in these buildings that they are dilapidated and shouldn't have anyone in.
Any questions?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I spoke with the gentleman, the author of this bill. It doesn't have a financial note attached to it. We don't know what type of costs we're dealing with on it. I do think that it is a good idea, but having spoken with him, he does agree that there needs to be some additional research data that needs to be attached with the document, and that the bill will be double referred if there is a financial obligation to be required with the cost of demolition. So I think he is going to ask the chair to hold the bill for consideration until next session.
Next session?
Yes, sir.
I agree to lay on the table subject to call.
Okay. All in favor of laying it on the table subject to call? Say aye.
Aye.
Lay it on the table subject to call. Okay, the next one is this was brought to me by some constituents who were concerned about procedures that the Public Service Commission is doing with their closed session. They tell me they're trying to follow the rules that are already set in place. but apparently they have not been doing it to the satisfaction of the voters. And this bill just requires them to do certain things to make sure that all the meeting that is going on is reported and they don't go into executive session too often.
What bill number are you on, Mr. Chairman?
Sir, ma'am,
What bill number?
1252.
Okay.
To read the notes here, it just says the bill provides public proceedings of the Public Service Commission shall be webcast, and each proceeding shall be placed on the commission's website for later viewing at any time. The bill also provides for the transcripts of the public proceedings of the Public Service Commission to be placed on the commission's website, access at no charge. And the bill provides that the discovery and response not deemed confidential shall be placed on the commission's website and a relevant docket for the public to access. And this bill shall provide that if a party before the Public Service Commission files information that deems to be confidential, the party must include why it is filing the information and that it should be deemed confidential. The commission shall then schedule a hearing to determine the confidentiality of the information, and the commission shall deem information as public useless, therefore is clear and substantial reason why to classify it as confidential. Anybody got a question?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This is Robin Robinson, and I'm not opposed to this bill. I was just curious, are there other bills that cover agencies like this? Or is this in answer to a question, as you alluded to in the beginning of your remarks about
this is one that just answered some questions that people had about this specific agency. We do have open meetings laws and things like that already on the books, but this was one that was just brought up by some constituents that felt like there was a necessary need to go this far with this agency.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? If not, title sufficient do pass is the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, motion carries. That's going to finish us for today, but we do have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 3:30 in this room. We'll go over the bills, some of the bills that we skipped, and I understand from the speaker we have more coming. So I can't tell you about those until I get them. But just watch the website and check on the committee. And if you got a question, give me a call. Do I hear a motion of rise and report? Thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you.
Thank you.